Imagine a winter morning in St. Petersburg, 1905. The air is thick with the cold, but a different kind of chill runs through the city. Tens of thousands of men, women, and children, dressed in their Sunday best, are marching not with weapons, but with icons, crosses, and a petition, a desperate plea to their beloved Tsar, Nicholas II, their little father. They seek not revolution, but relief from crushing poverty and brutal working conditions. They believe in their sovereign's goodness, convinced that if he only knew their suffering, he would intervene. But as they approach the gilded gates of the Winter Palace, the only response they receive is a deafening volley of rifle fire, shattering their faith, their peace, and the very foundation of the Russian Empire. Before we delve into the tragic details of the day that changed Russia forever, take a moment to hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the Calendar of Crime. Your support ensures you don't miss future episodes where we uncover the pivotal moments of history's darkest days. The story of Bloody Sunday is not a tale of sudden violence, but the inevitable eruption of decades of systemic oppression. By the turn of the 20th century, Russia was a vast, sprawling empire ruled by an absolute monarch, Tsar Nicholas II, who believed his power was granted by God. Beneath this glittering facade of autocracy, the vast majority of the population, the peasants and the industrial workers, lived in abject misery. The rapid state-sponsored industrialization of the late 1800s had dragged millions from the countryside into overcrowded, unsanitary cities like St. Petersburg, where they became cogs in a merciless industrial machine. Factory life was a nightmare of 12 to 15-hour workdays, 6 days a week with no safety regulations. No job security, and wages so low they barely covered the cost of a single room for an entire family. Accidents were commonplace, and illness meant instant dismissal. The workers were trapped in a cycle of poverty, their lives dictated by the arbitrary cruelty of factory owners and the indifference of a distant government. This simmering discontent was a powder keg, waiting for a spark. The man who provided the focus for this discontent was Father Gapon, a charismatic Ukrainian-born Orthodox priest. Gapon was a complex figure, initially working with the tacit approval of the Tsar's secret police, the Okhrana, who hoped he would channel worker grievances into harmless, non-revolutionary activities. He founded the Assembly of Russian Factory and Mill Workers of St. Petersburg, a legal workers' organization. Gapon's goal was to unite the workers under the banner of faith and loyalty to the Tsar, believing that reform could be achieved through peaceful, direct appeal to the monarch. By late 1904, the economic situation had worsened, and a strike at the massive Putilov steelworks over the dismissal of 4 workers quickly escalated. Gapon realized that mere economic demands were insufficient. The workers needed a voice, a fundamental change in their relationship with the state. He decided to lead a massive, peaceful demonstration to present a petition directly to the Tsar at his residence, the Winter Palace. The petition drafted by Gapon and the workers was a remarkable document. It was not a revolutionary manifesto calling for the overthrow of the Tsar, but a heart-wrenching plea from subjects to their sovereign. It began with the words, "Sovereign, we, the workers and inhabitants of the city of St. Petersburg, members of various estates, our wives, our children, and our helpless old parents, have come to you, sovereign, to seek justice and protection." The demands were twofold, economic and political. The economic demands were immediate and practical: an 8-hour workday, improved working conditions, and fair wages. But the political demands were radical for the time: freedom of speech, press, and assembly, the separation of church and state, and, most crucially, the establishment of a popularly elected constituent assembly to represent the people. This last point transformed the petition from a labor grievance into a direct challenge to the Tsar's absolute power. Over 150,000 workers signed it, staking their lives on the Tsar's mercy. Sunday, January 22, 1905, January 9th by the old-style calendar, dawned cold and clear. From all corners of St. Petersburg, 6 massive columns of workers, joined by their families, began their march toward the Winter Palace. They were solemn, orderly, and deeply religious. They carried no weapons, only religious icons, portraits of the Tsar, and banners proclaiming their loyalty. Father Gapon, dressed in his clerical robes, led the largest column, holding a cross aloft. The atmosphere was one of pilgrimage, not protest. They genuinely believed the Tsar would meet them, accept their petition, and solve their problems. Unbeknownst to the marchers, the Tsar was not in the city. Nicholas II, having been informed of the planned demonstration, had fled days earlier to his country residence at Tsarskoye Selo. He left the city's defense in the hands of his ministers and military commanders, who viewed the approaching crowds not as loyal subjects, but as a revolutionary mob. Orders were given to prevent the columns from reaching the palace square at all costs. The first shots were fired at the Narva Gate, where one of the largest columns was intercepted by a detachment of infantry and Cossacks. A warning volley was fired into the air, but the marchers, believing the bullets were blanks, pressed on. Then the soldiers fired directly into the dense crowd. The peaceful pilgrimage instantly became a scene of carnage. As the other columns approached the palace square from different directions, they met the same brutal response. Troops stationed around the square opened fire repeatedly. Eyewitness accounts described the horror. Women and children trampled in the panic. Icons and portraits of the Tsar falling into the snow, now stained crimson with blood. The soldiers continued to fire even as the crowds dispersed, chasing and shooting the fleeing workers. The official government count put the dead at 96, but revolutionary and eyewitness estimates ranged from 200 to over 1,000 killed, with many hundreds more wounded. The immediate physical toll of Bloody Sunday was devastating, but the psychological and political damage was catastrophic. The image of the Tsar as the benevolent little father was irrevocably shattered. The workers who had marched with such profound faith now saw their sovereign as Bloody Nicholas, a murderer who had ordered the slaughter of his own people. Father Gapon, having narrowly escaped the massacre, famously declared, "There is no God any longer. There is no Tsar." The news of the massacre spread like wildfire, igniting a wave of outrage across the empire. Strikes paralyzed St. Petersburg and quickly spread to other industrial centers. Peasants, emboldened by the urban unrest, began seizing land and attacking landlords. University students walked out in protest. The event, which began as a desperate plea for reform, had become the catalyst for the 1905 revolution, a year of unprecedented political turmoil that forced Nicholas II to concede the creation of a limited parliament, the Duma. Bloody Sunday was the true beginning of the end for the Romanov dynasty. It exposed the brutal, unyielding nature of the Tsarist regime and demonstrated that the government was willing to use lethal force against its own unarmed citizens. The loyalty that had bound the Russian people to their Tsar for centuries was broken in a single bloody afternoon. While the 1905 revolution was ultimately suppressed, the seeds of the 1917 revolution were sown on that cold January day. The workers, now politically awakened and radicalized, would never again trust the Tsar. The massacre transformed a peaceful, loyalist movement into a revolutionary one, paving the way for the Bolsheviks and the eventual collapse of the Russian Empire. The blood spilled on the snow of St. Petersburg was the price of a lesson learned, that in the face of absolute power, faith is no match for a bullet. If you found this deep dive into the Bloody Sunday Massacre compelling, please show your support. Comment below with your thoughts on the legacy of this tragic day. Share this video to spread awareness, and make sure you like and subscribe to the Calendar of Crime so you never miss another episode. Thanks for watching. Please comment, share, like, and subscribe for future episodes from the Calendar of Crime.